Thank you all for joining tonight for the Jewish Democratic Council of America phone bank in support of Terry McAuliffe. Tonight, we are thrilled to be joined by our friend, Bill Kristol, who happens to be a Virginian himself, and he's here tonight to talk about why he's supporting Terry McAuliffe. This is not the first time that we've been joined by Bill Kristol. Bill and Billy Kristol partnered together with us and Jews supporting American democracy for an ad last year that was pretty remarkable. We called it Two Bills for Biden. And we really appreciate this partnership. For those who don't know Bill Kristol, he is a Republican, been a Republican his whole life. And he is also a renowned media commentator. He was co-founder of the Weekly Standard and the editor-at-large of Bulwark. He's also the founder of Republican Voters Against Trump. Before that, Bill Kristol served in a number of high-level government positions, including chief of staff to both Vice President Dan Quayle, who we learned recently protected and defended our democracy in January, and Education Secretary Bill Bennett under President Reagan. Bill Kristol's committed to supporting actions to promoting economic growth and to stopping the spread of COVID-19. He's also been a key supporter, as I said, of Terry McAuliffe during this election. And we are proud that in addition to everything I've just mentioned, Bill is also a leader, a proud Jew, and a leader in the Jewish community as well. And Bill, it's just great to have you with us again. So I'm now going to turn it over to you to hear about why you are supporting Terry McAuliffe for governor of your great state of Virginia.
Well, thanks, Haley, and it's good to be with you all. I guess truth in advertising, we don't have party registration in Virginia, so that's how I duck questions about whether I'm still a Republican or not. But Pete Buttigieg in 2020 kept talking about how he wanted the support in primaries where you could vote, as here in Virginia in either party, or where independents could vote in the Democratic primary. He wanted the support of future former Republicans as well as Democrats and independents. So I've been saying for 2 years now that I'm a future former Republican. A friend pointed out the other day that at some point you can't keep being a future former, something. You just have to become something. So I guess I'll cross that bridge when I get to it. I did vote today, a couple hours ago, actually, for Terry McAuliffe. I have my little sticker here that I voted. This is the first day of early in-person voting in the local community government centers, as opposed to there was some voting the last couple of weeks already in the big government centers, but those are more dispersed and further away in my case. It was crowded. So this is going to be a pro-McAuliffe area. And it was there was a 20-minute wait on a weekday afternoon. So I guess that's a sign that maybe Democrats and McAuliffe supporters are getting alarmed or energized and realize it's a competitive election and they really need to get out there and vote. So to the degree you all can help make that happen with your phone banking, it's extremely important. Every poll that shows bigger turnout, that has a model that has something, a high turnout for a non-presidential year, has McAuliffe winning, literally every single one. When you see one of those polls that's 46-46 or one or two that have Youngkin up a point or two, it's when they have lower turnout. We don't know what the turnout's going to be. Turnout's notoriously hard to predict. Trump's not on the ballot. Maybe he's indirectly on the ballot through Youngkin. It's an off-year election. People are tired of politics a little bit. We all voted twice at least last year in the primary and the general, then another primary this year. But we really need to get McAuliffe supporters to vote. Anyone you can persuade and make the case for McAuliffe, that's fine too. I think they've done a pretty good job of making the case for him in the campaign. I would say actually, though, that it's been so focused on Youngkin, I'll come back to that in a second, and on Trump to some degree. People have forgotten that Terry McAuliffe was actually a good governor for 4 years of this state. He's proven it's not like you're choosing between two random businessmen who've never been involved in politics, and in Virginia politics, Youngkin's never been involved at all. McAuliffe is a good governor. His lieutenant governor who became governor, Ralph Norther's a good governor. The state is in good shape. It's unfashionable to make that kind of argument because everyone's an outsider these days and everyone's unhappy, and you shouldn't sound like you're defending the status quo. But I'm just telling you honestly, as someone who's lived here for 35 years, this has been a well-governed state, and McAuliffe was a good governor, and crime is low, and the education system is pretty good, and taxes are pretty low, and there are a lot of new business startups here in Northern Virginia, at least. I can't speak about the whole state, but the data suggests the whole state's in pretty good shape. So I think that's just one point to keep in mind when people start talking about, well, what's wrong with Youngkin? McAuliffe, I'm a little tired of seeing him. Just a ridiculous point of view. Youngkin, on the other hand, is risky. He's shown a willingness to pander, obviously, to Trump personally, to the election lie, which for me is a disqualification. But even in things like his economic program, he's sort of vaguely signed on to 0% income tax. Let's get rid of the income tax in Virginia, without explaining how that would work, where that money would come from, why this isn't what Sam Brownback tried to do pretty disastrously in Kansas, and so forth. So I think it's a pretty easy case to make, honestly, to independents and some former Republicans for McAuliffe. He's a centrist Democrat, responsible Democrat. And then the case against Youngkin, I think, is important, that he really has pandered to Trump. People can say he's not really a Trump-like person. He's not Marjorie Taylor Greene or something. But do we want a party where politics where every candidate of one party is pandering to a big lie that really undermines our democracy and undermines it going forward, incidentally? And he's supporting candidates at this local level who are full-on Trumpists and has never repudiated any of them, to my knowledge. So he's trying to straddle this, being establishment Republican who's for Trump. And he's done an adequate job, I suppose. And he spent a fortune on ads and has convinced some people of this, but it's we do not want this to become the model going forward that Republicans can embrace and look sort of respectable while still not confronting the terrible facts about the Trump administration and the big lie and everything that implies about our elections going forward. He's done the same thing with vaccines, incidentally, kind of. I'm personally for the vaccine, but we shouldn't make anyone do anything. McAuliffe, I think, has beaten him up pretty well on that issue, and probably should emphasize it as we close here, as people here, certainly in Northern Virginia, are pro-mask, pro-vaccine, pro-getting beyond this pandemic to the degree we can. Anyway, so I think turnout is going to be key, though. So it's really important what you all are doing, and thank you for doing it.
Thanks, Bill. Well, obviously, we're a Jewish organization, and we are particularly interested in the Jewish angle of this race. And we've seen the Virginia Republican Party first attack some state delegates using some tropes. We've seen anti-Semitism come into play in this election. And of course, I was just told not to say the state of Virginia, the Commonwealth.
Yeah, I know.
That sadly, 4 years ago, we saw neo-Nazis marching in the street. And McAuliffe at the time as the governor, of course, strongly condemned it. So talk about kind of the Jewish dynamic at hand here. And as a Jew, how it is that your values have led you to support McAuliffe.
So the Charlottesville thing was, of course, awful and much closer to home for us here, really close to home for people in Charlottesville, pretty close to home for those of us, 100 miles away here, and much more so than the rest of the country, though, of course, is a huge national story. McAuliffe behaved extremely well. I mean, of course, he was condemned the violence. Everyone except for Trump, at least had the decency to do that. But he really showed an understanding and an empathy for what was at stake. I know someone pretty well who's in the synagogue in Charlottesville that was right there. If you remember the march on Friday night, they kind of went right by it, and they were there, for services. And McAuliffe talked to them, and he showed a real appreciation of kind of of the horror of the moment, I would say, from everyone's point of view, but especially perhaps from a Jewish point of view. They will not replace us and all that. And so McAuliffe has had a long relationship with the Jewish community, and a very friendly one. He rose to the occasion. I remember I was on TV. I think it was then that night. So that was Saturday. Then was when that young woman was killed, and the whole thing exploded even worse, even more dramatically. I think I was on CNN that night, and I remember someone saying, this was, remember, only 9-10 months into the Trump presidency, so people still had some sort of hopes, I don't know, that he would behave like a normal president and say something appropriate. And I remember saying, he's not going to do that. So someone said, it's very important for the country, the president, the bully pulpit, et cetera. And I said, he's not going to do that. He's not going to rise to the occasion. But you know what the good news is? In America, it's better to have a president who rises to the occasion, but we have other public leaders, civic leaders. They can be religious leaders and educational leaders and labor and business leaders and so forth, but they can also be local and state government officials. And I remember mentioning that McAuliffe was an example of a state official who had risen to the occasion, and that's what we're going to need for the next 4 years to get through the Trump years in terms of civic education and leadership. So McAuliffe was excellent at that moment. And the Virginia Republican Party, there are a lot of normal, let's just say, Virginia Republicans, but they have the fringes certainly, and more than the fringes, have dabbled with various anti-Semitic tropes. And for me, it's more that the mainstream Republicans have tolerated that and not repudiated it. So there's been no policing of the borders. Elaine Luria, the congresswoman from Virginia Beach, who's happens to be Jewish, very good member of Congress, made this point the other day. She's denounced times when people in her party or on her side of the aisle more broadly have engaged in what she regarded as anti-Semitic behavior or statements, or tolerated it from others, but that does not happen from the Republicans here in Virginia, and has not happened particularly from Youngkin. So I think that is an important difference.
Great. Well, we have a few questions from the audience. Michael Gelman says, I'll just read it. It's great to have you on the call. Youngkin is making a lot of noise about Terry's comment from the second debate about parents not having a role in school policy. How serious is this in terms of the Virginia electorate?
I mean, Youngkin's been mischaracterizing, the media did, honestly, too, what McAuliffe said, but it may be having some effect. And McAuliffe has an ad up now trying to set the record straight. I'm not sure it's having as much effect as the media think. They tend to overinterpret all these little fights, which they, as opposed to just, the fact is the race hasn't changed very much. It's slowed, it's closed a bit, as you would expect. Races often do, and that's pretty much it. But so just to put it in context, I was at that debate. It was here in Northern Virginia. McAuliffe, about a few minutes before McAuliffe said what he said, which wasn't, we should look up and get the exact wording, but someone had asked about, as I recall, and mentioned the fact that these school board meetings were being disrupted, and really in a terrible way, in parts of Virginia, Loudoun County especially, with these protesters and threats and people, claiming that stuff was being taught that wasn't being taught, but then whatever was being taught, and parents obviously have a right to object to, complain about things being taught and suggest that other things should be taught, whatever. But it was way beyond normal complaints. I'd like to have a meeting with the principal. It was kind of Trump, what do you expect? Trumpy bludgeoning. We've seen this, of course, all across the country. So that was the context in which this question gets asked. McAuliffe then defends the teachers and the right to teach, the importance of teaching honestly and accurately. And I can't think there's a sort of a follow-up from the moderator. What about the parents, though? Don't they have a point? And McAuliffe was trying to make the point, Terry was trying to make the point that you can't have a system where every one parent doesn't like one book and suddenly the whole school curriculum is changed because this parent allegedly has read, the parent usually hasn't even looked at the book, right? Has read somewhere that this book has something in it. There is a process. Look, we've lived here 35 years. Our kids went to the Fairfax County schools. We've had times when we didn't like certain things that were taught, and we've had meetings with teachers and principals, and we've gotten together with other parents to send letters. I'm sure many people on this call have done all this kind of stuff at private schools or public schools. And the Virginia system, it's a bureaucracy like all others, so it's not always quite as responsive as you would like, but there is a way to do this in a civil and decent way. And I think all Terry was saying is we need to do it in that way and not have 20 parents screaming at a school board meeting at a district that has 2,000 kids, and suddenly have, the principal say, oh my God, this thing needs to be pulled from the curriculum and this teacher needs to be suspended. We've seen that happening around the country, and that is bad. That is mob rule, and that is scary. So that's what McAuliffe was trying to say we shouldn't do. It got then interpreted as he doesn't want parents to have any say at all, which is ridiculous, and he doesn't believe that. And I think he's tried to set the record straight on that. And I'm not sure it's really even working as an issue. I would flip the issue around. Youngkin is the one who is fanning the flames, I would almost say, especially with the speech he gave Tuesday night about school safety, of kind of paranoia among parents as to what's happening in the Virginia public schools. This is Virginia, incidentally. This is not, I went to school up in Boston and Cambridge. I grew up in New York City. I've lived in liberal areas. This is very Virginia. It's not, we're not like on the cutting edge, believe me, of not only critical race theory, but critical theory of any kind. We're a pretty traditional state. It's changed a lot, which is good. And there have been debates about how to manage that change. And I would say Virginia, incidentally, if I could just digress for 20 seconds, has done a pretty good job of sort of managing coming to grips with certain aspects of our history in ways that were participatory and democratic. The Charlottesville City Council voted to move the statue of Lee and all that kind of thing. Names have been, streets have been, major schools have been renamed here in Fairfax County. It's been done peacefully, and it's been done with a lot of community input, and it's been done by elected boards of, either school boards or county supervisors. So actually, Youngkin, and this is very typical of the Trumpy GOP, is taking a system that's working pretty well, I would say, to resolve difficult issues, and making it and treating it with such irresponsible demagoguery that he's heightening tensions, and that's what he's doing, I think, with this attack on McAuliffe.
So our last question, I put this in the category of we don't get to talk to Republicans very often. So this one is not specific to Virginia, but if you'll allow us.
Sure.
Michael Rosenzweig asks, what are your thoughts about the filibuster? Do you see any prospect for filibuster reform that would allow passage for the Freedom to Vote Act? And I would just say this is not only a priority of Jewish Democrats, but according to our polling, 50% of Jewish Republicans are also concerned about voter suppression laws, which are being not only proposed, but enacted throughout the country.
Yeah, so I've been involved in that issue a fair amount. We have Republicans for Voting Rights, which is an offshoot of our Defending Democracy Together group. So, yeah, so I think my short answer is I've never been actually in favor of the filibuster, leaving aside the last year or two. There's just no evidence that it encourages compromise or deliberation. In fact, there's a lot of evidence that the 40 vote, the 60 vote rule discourages debate. We're seeing a lot of, the filibuster has been very strong in the last few years. We're seeing a lot of healthy debate in the Senate. I mean, it's the opposite. They literally voted against starting debate. You realize that the vote on the filibuster this week was a vote on the motion to proceed to the bill. In the old days, when I got to Washington, that was never filibustered. It was not even thought it was appropriate to do that. Of course, you could proceed to the bill. Then you did have to get 60 votes in some cases, but it was pretty rarely invoked to get a vote on the bill. But think about that. You've all been in different legislative bodies and homeowner associations and PTAs and stuff. Since when do you not debate something unless you already get 60 votes or 60%? It's really ludicrous, honestly. So the system is totally broken. People are hanging on to it because they think in principle a supermajority for some things that are important isn't crazy. I mean, obviously a lot of democratic systems have that for certain important votes. You need to get 60% or 66% or whatever, 67%. But to have it routinely invoked, to have a 60 vote rule for everything, which is what you now have in the Senate, is nuts. And of course, it got changed for appointments for the courts and for the executive branch. But it's not been changed for legislation, except for this one for budget matters. So you have everything crammed into reconciliation, which is another kind of crazy offshoot of the filibuster. One problem with reconciliation is everything gets done in one giant bill. And so people say correctly, in my view, that, well, gee, it's kind of bad for why can't we debate the child care tax credit separately from free preschool education, separately from how community colleges should be funded? They're all different issues, right? You can be for the liberal position on one and skeptical of it on another. Well, no, that's all in one bill for reconciliation. Why is it in one bill? Because it's the only thing that can't be filibustered and can get passed with 51 votes. So the filibuster is really messed up, actually, the legislative process. It does not enhance it. I'm not sure it ever really enhanced it, honestly, if you look at what it was used for in the old days. So I'm against the filibuster. I'm for the voting rights legislation. I do think there's a decent chance that Manchin and Sinema will go along with a carve out on the filibuster. Manchin's invested a lot in this. He's improved the bill, in my view, made it narrower than some of the groups wanted, that original For the People Act. There's a John Lewis bill that's about to get also filibuster. There's also there's a reform, I'll close on this, a reform of the Electoral Count Act, which is like the 1887 bill that governs what we all learned a lot about a year ago, which is like what happens between election day and the ceremonial convening of Congress to ratify the election results. Well, it turns out this kind of complicated, and the state electors meet, and all this stuff goes on at the state level, and then they send people to Washington or send their votes to Washington, and the vice president presides over the Congress, the two houses that meet together to ratify it. This is all worked okay because no one ever made an issue of it, honestly. And so it's a little Rube Goldberg like, but now it's a problem. And they're totally common sense, bipartisan, nonpartisan reforms that would just make the system more reliable, honestly, just get the guardrails up against people trying to overwhelm the system or subvert it. And the Republicans have no interest in that either. So in my view, they should add that probably to this bill, add John Lewis, and then Manchin should decide to that on this set of democracy-related issues, election-related issues, we need to just overcome the filibuster. I don't know that he will, but I think people are a little too pessimistic, a little too certain that he won't. He's invested a lot in this, and I think he may well end up doing what we would think is the right thing.
We love the optimism. You all heard it here. Bill not only thinks that Terry McAuliffe is going to win, but that Joe Manchin will support a carve out for our democracy from the filibuster. So this is the best news we've heard in a long time, I have to say.
Yeah, well, this and $3.20 will get you a cup of coffee at, pizza.
Oh, this is amazing. Okay, I know I said that was the last question. This one can be quick though.
Okay.
Susie Stern raises a good point that on Monday, after 4 years, the trial in Charlottesville begins against the planners, those who planned the Unite the Right rally 4 years ago. Any chance that publicity around the trial may have an impact in Virginia on the election?
I hadn't thought of that, and I think it could, I suppose. It'll get a fair amount of publicity throughout Virginia, but especially in that Charlottesville area. Charlottesville itself is a good area for Democrats, but actually the surrounding area is quite Republican. And so to the degree that decent Republicans in that area are appalled by what happened, which they are, I think, maybe it will remind people that McAuliffe, two things: McAuliffe did a good job as governor then, but also that Youngkin has not distanced himself fully from the kinds of people who were involved in that, or who were involved in tolerating that and in excusing that.
Great. I see an ad in the making there. Okay, one more thing, with your permission, Bill. What we do when we're phone banking is we like to take a picture, if that's okay.
Sure.
So if everyone could turn on their camera and hold up your phone as if you're phone banking, and we're going to take a screenshot. Okay, are we good? Who's taking this? Ben, you good? You getting it? Smile.
Wait, hold on.
Yeah, now you have to take it.
I wasn't prepared to take
Okay.
a screenshot. Okay, hold on. Let me. All right, everybody. Oh, wait, hold on. Let me turn it to gallery mode real quick. All right, everybody on 3. 1, 2, 3. All right, got it.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Bill. And I also want to give a shout out to Susan Wagner. She was our partner from Jews Defending American Values. And it was her idea to have Bill Kristol and Billy Kristol together, and she helped us make it a reality. So thanks to Susan for the wonderful idea. Thanks to you, Bill.
Sure.
It's not easy to cross party lines in the way you have, and you've done it because of your patriotism, your belief in your values and your integrity, and we so appreciate it.
Well, thanks, Haley. Hi, Susan, and good luck to all of you, and hope to see you all again soon. And maybe I'm happy we can celebrate either Virginia and or voting rights. That would be good.